Welcome back to the Knife Life. If you decide to carry a knife for self-defense, it's important to select the right knife for the job. There are a number of factors that you need to consider before you drop the money on a knife and start wearing it around. Today, we are going to go over the essentials of picking a knife for self-defense. The first thing that you need to do before you even start looking at knives is to familiarize yourself with your local knife laws. Make sure that you know the rules beforehand. If you have to defend yourself and you use an illegal blade, you are going to have an even more uncomfortable conversation with law enforcement in an already bad situation. Do yourself a favor and avoid that. Colorado law, for example, states that a knife can be carried concealed if the blade is less than 3.5 inches in length. California has no restrictions on the length of folding knives except for switchblades, whose blades must be shorter than 2 inches. San Antonio, Texas prohibits all locking blade folders except for work knives. On the other hand, states like New Hampshire don't care what you carry. So do your homework, figure out what your limits are in your area, and take those into account. Once you do, we can move on to size. You will need to work in the size limit set by your local ordinances. Keep in mind that you are going to have to carry this knife around with you all day, every day. You also don't want to just broadcast to everyone around you, "Hey, I got a knife!" Bad idea. The reality is that a small knife is far more than capable of getting the job done. A folding blade of 2 to 3.5 inches is easily concealable, it's long enough to defeat thick clothing, and effective for debilitating cuts. Even smaller blades, like a Fred Perrin LeGriff, can be extremely dangerous as well. Anything larger can make things harder to conceal and carry without any worthwhile benefits. So make sure to leave that monster blade at home.
Oh, hell yeah.
Put it back. Now, just because a knife is legal and it's the right size does not mean it's useful. Let's review the basics of what you need from a defensive knife. It has to cut, it has to thrust, it has to stay open, and you have to be able to hold on to it. Naturally, one would think that these are no-brainers, but it's worth taking some time to think about them. Make sure to carefully consider the blade profile of your potential carry knives. Many people like to carry karambits simply since they look cool, for example. The inward curve of a karambit tends to lead to a very aggressive cutting action, but that same curved tip can make thrusting difficult. The same goes for most any hook build type of knife, such as the Spyderco Matriarch and civilian knives. The downward curve acts like a talon and it greatly increases cutting, but thrusting through tough or thick clothing to get to a cut will be extremely difficult with them. You can also have too much of a good thing as well. Some karambit knives have an extremely tight radius in their blade that will snag on bone and prevent you from completing cuts. Something extremely bad while fighting for your life. For the new knife guy, I would recommend either the more traditional drop point knives or Wharncliffe style blades due to their ability to easily both cut and thrust. More on that later. Many modern fighting knives are folders due to their ease of carry and concealment. One drawback of a folding knife is, well, that it folds. It's a weak point in the blade. If a blade closes in the middle of a fight, when due to impact on the back of the blade, or striking bone on a thrust, your already terrible day just got worse. The moral of the story is make sure that your knife has a solid locking mechanism. Your Swiss Army knife or any other slip joint knives aren't going to be good enough. Backlock and liner lock knives are the most common locking mechanisms out there, and they work. There are some who have concerns about a tight grip engaging the release mechanism for the blade, but I personally have never experienced this issue. Experiment with the blade, and if gripping it causes you problems, move to a different style of lock. Compression locks, such as found in the Yojimbo 2, are an excellent upgrade. They are extremely strong and not prone to accidental release. If you are really worried about a folder failing, then there's always the old school fallback of a fixed blade knife. Find the solution for you. The important thing is at the end of the day, you can still count to 10. The final utilitarian concern is being able to hold on to your knife. If your arm gets hit and your blade goes flying, the knife isn't going to do you much good on the other side of the room. The solution is pretty simple. Get a knife with a textured grip. Knives with polished stainless grips may look great, but they are notorious for slipping out of your hands at the worst possible time. Your hands may be covered in sweat, blood, or God knows what, but you have to be able to retain your grip no matter what. Get a textured grip. Keep the House of Flying Daggers and the movies. Now, just because you have a knife doesn't mean that it's useful. A knife sitting in your pocket isn't going to do you much good. You actually have to get it out and bring it into the fight, and it's critical that you do so quickly. About the fastest deployment you can get is with a fixed blade. You grab the handle of the knife and you pull it out of the sheath and you are ready to go. Folders, on the other hand, require a little bit more work. Two knives that are very popular are automatics and flippers. I like both types of knives, but I don't carry them as self-defense blades. Depending upon the automatic, I find it somewhat difficult to locate and press the release button and then readjust my grip. Automatics are also prone to failures. If a spring fails, something in your pocket gets lodged in the mechanism, etc., your knife isn't getting into the fight. Also consider that many autos have a safety mechanism that prevents the knife from accidentally deploying in your pants pockets. If you use the safety, you will have to disengage it before you can open the blade. Autos are cool, but there is a lot that can go wrong with them, and they aren't really faster than other options. Flippers are handy little blades that can be opened with one hand, and they make great utility knives. However, I also have issues with deploying a flipper and then having to drastically readjust my grip. I've also had issues with flippers not opening completely. That's a serious problem. As such, I prefer not to carry them either. Knives with thumb studs or holes in the blade that allow purchase on the knife are about the most reliable means of opening. The thumb pushes the blade into the open position and minimal regripping is required. This method is just as fast as an automatic knife and much more reliable. Inertial openings can also be performed with these knives in order to deploy them reliably and in the fastest method possible. These are the types of knives that I carry regularly. One last thing to consider is having enough exposed blade to perform a two-handed opening. While it is necessary for your knife to be openable with one hand, ripping the blade open and locked with both hands is the most reliable method of opening your knife, provided you have the time and space to do so. Make sure that you can grip the blade with your offhand in order to open the knife. Keep in mind that these are just my recommendations. If you are able to reliably deploy an auto, flipper, or any other kind of knife, then by all means do so. The important thing is that you are actually able to defend yourself. But if you are new, it's best to keep things simple. With that said, let's take a look at some of the knives that meet all of the requirements that we just spoke about. While there are many knives that will work amazingly well for a defensive knife, here are my top 3 recommendations. The Yojimbo 2 is a purpose-built knife designed by Michael Janich and manufactured by Spyderco. The Wharncliffe design, or triangular-shaped blade, cuts more aggressively than most other knife designs while retaining the ability to thrust, unlike a hook-bill blade. The Yojimbo 2 makes use of a compression lock, which makes sure that when the blade is open, it stays open. The grip is textured and can be opened easily with 1 or 2 hands. The blade length is 3.12 inches, within the legal limits of most areas. It is effective, compact, reliable, and an ideal choice. For those who prefer the simplicity of a fixed blade knife, I present to you the Nightingale. These are blades that I personally make, and you will be able to see the manufacturing process in an upcoming video. Also, making use of the Wharncliffe design, these knives will cut aggressively, and the angle of the tip makes them particularly effective in a thrust. These knives can be deployed extremely fast from a sheath to great effect with knotted paracord wrap to secure your grip. The blades are 2.75 inches long in order to meet legal requirements. My final recommendation is the Spyderco Delica. Unassuming and relatively plain, the Delica is actually an excellent budget option for a combative knife. The Delica will not cut as aggressively as a Wharncliffe blade will, but it is more than capable of disabling an attacker. This knife makes use of a backlock locking mechanism that, as mentioned before, has the potential to disengage when gripped too tight in the wrong way. But in the years that I carried one and used one, I never experienced a problem with it, and I would be happy to carry one again. This knife has a blade of 2.875 inches. And that covers the basics of selecting a defensive knife. If you found this video helpful, please like, subscribe, and help me grow this channel. For those interested in obtaining any of the recommended knives, check out the links down in the description below. For those with further questions, hit me up in the comments and I will get back to you. Until next time, stay safe and keep living the knife life.